Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's what you get with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1. It is our podcast we love to do for you every week here during the race season. Formula One getting more and more intense, but you already have a champion crowned. Max Verstappen over the weekend crowned your champion in an unceremonious way by just finding himself 6 little points. That's all he needed to win the world championship. He did it in the sprint race, and there you go. By finishing second in the sprint race, Oscar Piastri absolutely showing that he is exactly what they thought he was going to be at McLaren. Thank heavens for Zach Brown and his team. Maybe for Lando. I don't know if he loves having a teammate that's outperforming him to a little bit of an extent. But, you know, it's all the things we want to talk about. And, of course, always joining me here on the program, Dan Jimenez, my co-host of the show. What's up, Dan?
Just recovering from a crazy race weekend. There's so much to talk about. It was wild, but credit where credit is due to Max on his 3rd championship. And of course he had to win it in a weird way. That's just how he does it. And it was a little poetic that he won it the moment Sergio wrecked. Like when Sergio was out of the race, they're like, he wins.
Oh, well. And you know what? For once, that the crash wasn't caused by Checo, so I thought that was nice.
It wasn't.
I mean, like it would have been fortuitous. It would have been very poetic for the rest of the season if Checo would have put it into the wall and taken out 3 or 4 other people. But instead, he was the collateral damage in a crash, and a bad weekend, of course, for him. But Max Verstappen is your world champion. Let's just start there. What does a 3-time world champion mean in the world of F1? Like, where does that put Max? Knowing that he still has probably his best racing ahead of him, even still.
He's already top 5 all time, I think. And he's just so young that he's on pace to be the best all time. You know, the win count that he has, I think he's approaching Sebastian Vettel's total win count, which is crazy for how long Sebastian was dominant. Like Max, for as young as he is, I mean, he's on a trajectory that will put him at the very top. But you think about Lewis's 7 championships, and I was at Schumacher that had 7 championships as well.
Yes, yeah.
And so, you know, Max has got 4 more to go to tie those guys and 5 more to go to beat the record. That's, I think, puts into perspective how impressive those runs were from Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. But I mean, undoubtedly, you know, top 5 all time, but on track to be number 1.
Better than Alan Prost. Better than Sebastian Vettel. What about Vettel? He's a 4-timer, also with Red Bull.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, we gotta talk through it. I think I had looked up a stat, or I'd seen a stat that how many had won 3 in a row, and I think there's maybe only 4 others that had won 3 in a row.
In a row, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and Vettel was one of those. They won 4, I think, in a row with him. Yeah. Senna is another 3-time champ, and obviously gone way before his time, obviously. But when you talk about top 3 or 4, people always say Schumacher, Hamilton, Senna. Periodically, you'll hear like a Niki Lauda, or you know, people throw in the Juan Manuel Fangio, you know, side of things because you're like, yeah, he was the first and best, like real, you know, champion in the early days of F1. I don't know, maybe Sir Jackie Stewart, somebody along those lines. But really, the top 3 or 4 names are always Schumacher, Hamilton, Senna, and I would imagine that Max Verstappen, it would be hard to leave him off once he. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many you've got. There's so much that has to go into winning a championship too. You have to be a great racer, but you also have to have like an extremely good car. And in the cases of like, because George Russell, would he be a champion if he was in the Red Bull this year and Max was in the Mercedes this year? I mean, who's to say no? I don't know. That's the interesting thing about this about this sport is, with all the guys who win the championships, there are guys in there that they go, remember when that guy won a championship? That was wild. You know, like I can't believe David Coulthard won a championship, or
Jenson Button out of nowhere in 2009.
Damon Hill gets a world championship, and then it's a one-off, and they're out. And most of the time, it has to deal with the fact that their car just suddenly gets eclipsed in the technical side of things. I don't know when that's going to stop for Red Bull, but people seem to be getting at least a little bit closer. That's for me something in the sport that signals the next few years are going to be really, really good racing, I think.
Yeah. Max said it in this post race, but he had to push that whole race to stay in front of the McLarens. And I think there was an analysis that I think from like lap 19 onwards, so the last, call it 2/3 of the race, McLaren actually outpaced Max.
Wow.
So they had a faster race pace. Now there was the fact that they were having to pit every 18 laps mandated by Pirelli, which we could get into all that. But that, I think, took away some of Red Bull's advantage. Where I think Max really shines is just longevity, like how long he can get performance out of the tires for. And Pirelli kind of took that away when they said you got to pit after 18 laps. And so it was just push for 18 laps in a row. And when it's straight up like that, the McLaren seems to be faster than even the Red Bull, which is pretty crazy to see. And, we'll see when we go into Austin if that holds. I doubt we'll have the same tire issues and in the tire restrictions like we had in Qatar. But they are definitely getting closer.
On a scale of 1 to Russia, how bad is this race? The one that they had in Qatar over the weekend, because I know that Max clinched there, but there were so many issues. The tire mandates, what happened there, drivers getting absolutely sick with how much they have to stop, how hot the whole thing was. This was a disaster from a organizer's perspective. What went wrong with this race? Yeah.
So the Losail Circuit, it was originally designed to be a MotoGP racetrack. And so it has a very different kind of layout than a lot of the tracks that we go to. It's just super high speed flowing. There just isn't a rest. You're like constantly under lateral G load. It feels like there's just one stretch along the front, along the pit straight, and then everything else is just constant turning. So they resurfaced the track this year before this race, and they put on a low grip surface, which is something new that I don't think we've seen at any other track. And they also changed the curbs. So the curbing that is on the exit of all the corners, which is meant to be used as a way to kind of give the driver a feel of where they are exiting the corner and kind of a place to aim for. It's also used as the out of bounds. So those curbs took on a new design that we haven't had at any other track. They're like, the cross section of it is like a jagged pyramid.
Yeah.
And instead of like a rumble or a sausage curve or something that's more curved, right? And so the pyramids were just causing so much stress on the tires that after Saturday, Pirelli said they looked at the tires under a microscope and could see, fractures, tears starting to happen in the tires. And so they didn't want to have an issue where, a driver blows a tire going over the curb and, gets hurt, which I understand for safety reasons. If you know that like a tire is going to be unsafe, then you got to do something about it. Now, the first attempt that they made at this is they, in turns 15 and 16, where people were going over and it was the worst, they like drew the track limit line in like 3 feet. And that didn't seem to do enough. And so then right before the race, they said, okay, nobody can go longer than 18 laps on a tire. And, used tires, you had to take into account how many laps that they had already done. And, they did that for the sake of safety. But what it ended up causing, the collateral like effect that they didn't anticipate, was that it caused it to become like 3 sprint races in a row. And everyone was going all out, like qualifying push pace for 18 laps and then pit and then push and then pit. Without that mandate, going to the mediums or the hards, you stretch it out to 25, maybe 30 laps, then you actually can manage your pace. And so not only was it hot, it was, I think it was over 100 degrees, even at night. The ambient air temperature was over 100 degrees. And I saw one driver cite it as 150 degrees inside of the cockpit.
Yeah, 80 Celsius is what Ocon said he thought it was.
Oh my gosh, that's even higher. Yeah. So hot, high G load wherever you go, and there's just no relenting. And then the hot air spilling off the cars in front of you. It just was a terrible rest, like a kind of a perfect storm of a situation that was, I think, in the end, a lot more dangerous than F1 realized it was going to be.
So Esteban Ocon was vomiting in his helmet on laps 15, 16, and 17, according to him. You saw, of course, Logan Sargent said, I'm like having a hard time staying conscious. Like,
yeah, he had a heat stroke. Yeah.
So he was having a real problem. Alex Albon got treated for acute heat exposure. This is a nightmare scenario. And hearing Ocon describe it, so imagine going through this race. You are hotter than you've ever been. These cars don't do a great job of keeping the heat behind you anyway. Like the heat is just on top of you the whole race, And even if you are, these guys are almost passing out at 200 miles an hour down the straight. This could be, and then the tire situation on top of it, the time penalties that came from these ridiculous track limits, right? It was just an insane thing to watch. Just one person after the other, black and white flag, 5-second penalty, 10-second penalty. I was so over it. Like, I had a really hard time going, well, I don't want to have to do this math. Are these guys winning this race or not? Like, I don't have to think, he's going to be, but he's going to have to serve a 10-second time penalty. This was a disaster of a race. Despite that, Max wins. You have another double podium finish for McLaren. These guys are on pace right now. I saw actually a really cool. I thought, Dan would appreciate this, because it was like, hey, here's what their points are right now. Here's where they would be if they kind of averaged out from the rest of the season what their point totals have been. Here's where they end up if they average the last 6 races. And McLaren will run down both Mercedes and Ferrari, and, of course, Aston Martin. They would end up finishing second in the Constructors' title if they're able to keep this pace that they've had over the last 6 races. If they're able to keep the last 2 races, obviously, if they're the ones finishing right behind Max the rest of the way, they'll run away with the second-place finish. But what an insane year, considering that nobody had them. Everybody was just massively disappointed by McLaren. I love Oscar Piastri, what he's brought to the sport. And I think Lando Norris is one of the better drivers, and he's being pushed. They couldn't have asked for a better situation for them to come into a fast car right now with McLaren.
Yeah, they're probably the best driver pairing. Like, if you're going to start a team today, those two together is, I think, the best pairing in Formula One right now. And they're just so incredibly fast. It's going to be really fun to see. And like, the difference between finishing 5th and 2nd in the constructor standings is like tens of millions of dollars. So this is meaningful money. It might be the difference between like being profitable on the year or not. This is a really big deal. And it's cool to see Lando getting pushed by his teammate, because it's been a while since, he wasn't the clear number 1. And, to hear when on the radio they said, hey, just hold position, don't race for second. And, a little bit of sassiness coming back from Lando, like, really? Like, are you kidding me? It's great to see that, because I love seeing the competition between teammates on the same team. And I think McLaren is just easy to cheer for right now.
Who is the biggest loser of the weekend? I think I know your answer, but I want to hear you say it.
I'm going to say Lance Stroll.
Yeah. My favorite.
Man, Lance.
I don't know. Listen, this happens in a lot of sports. High level sports. But F1's unique in the sense that you have the person that's, the pinnacle of the racing world is an F1 seat, right? And so to have that, but interestingly enough, in other sports, the top elite of the most elite are there on, like, it's a meritocracy, right? They have to absolutely earn that spot. There's always the question with Lance of whether or not he deserves it. And he kind of has proven over the last, 12 races that he doesn't deserve a seat, it seems like. But then it goes even further this week, shoving his trainer, is what it looked like on video, although we didn't have anything conclusive, but that's what it looked like. The after race interview that he had with Sky Sports, when they're like, tell us what happened. And he's just cussing into it, and they're going, apologies for the language. I always love that from the Brits. and him just looking like an absolute giant silver spoon baby out there on the racetrack. Like, I cannot imagine this will last much longer for Lance Stroll. He does not seem like he's, one, good enough for the sport, or two, seem like that he even enjoys it. And then he even has to come out today and say what a joke of a race that was. But he's the joke of the racer. Like, all these other guys, come on. Like, I don't know if of all the guys who don't deserve a seat, you think about like your Liam Lawsons or your Logan Sargents, where people are like, yeah, they're still too pretty young for this. I don't know if they're ready for it. This guy might lose his seat. Lance Stroll might be the least deserving guy right now on the grid.
Yeah, you see in other sports where some, of the pros kind of, we witness them falling out of love with the sport that they're in. I'm thinking, Kyrie Irving or maybe Aaron Rodgers a little bit for a period there. You just don't feel like that their heart is really in it. They're not enjoying it. But in none of those cases, and like as a crew member tried to catch it, and like it looks like the FIA is going to maybe penalize him for, actions detrimental to the FIA.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that too. It was like sliding off of the edge of the thing, and the guy missed it. And he was like, oh, okay, no problem. We don't need that. I don't know. Like, I try to think of somebody in more disarray. Checo right now is like in not the good graces of his team. It seems like when you talk about two separate sides of the garage, I can't think of a different place than Alonso and Stroll, Checo and Verstappen. Like, it just feels like very different, very weird vibes in the same garage on the two different sides. I can't imagine it being much different or much worse in other teams. Maybe I'm missing that, but I don't know. It seemed like such a weird thing, on top of the fact that this racetrack just did all that it could to find itself into the worst host of the entire season, just the weirdest weekend of the entire weekend of racing.
Yeah, I think that has potential of actually being a pretty entertaining race, but they got to move it later in the year, which next year it's on track to be like December 1st. Like the last race of the year next year is like December 8th or 9th. It's going to be weird watching F1 next to like my Christmas tree, but that's what's going to happen.
I'll take it though. Yeah.
And so it's going to be later in the year, which maybe it's 10, 15 degrees cooler. And then Pirelli has to, I think, bring different tires and not mandate, some restriction like that. And then they got to fix the curbs. I think if you do all that, it could be really exciting. I think it's a cool dynamic how it like blows sand onto the dirt, onto the track surface. And like, it just kind of makes it a bit like of a Mario Kart track. So I think that it has potential to be a good race, but yeah, it was such a snafu this last weekend.
All right, from across the world of F1, because there was the actual race part, the podium was an interesting finish there, and you've got, the constructor's title, of course, is going to Red Bull. The driver's title already went to Max. So now what do you watch the rest of the season? Dan, like, what's the thing that you look at and you go, oh, that's an exciting part of this?
I think watching Lewis chase down Checo for second in the driver's standings. I think Lewis has had an underrated year, and if he can pull off second and pull that Mercedes in front of another Red Bull, I think that's a really big storyline. And then like we talked about, just watching McLaren climb up the standings and see how many, can they claim Aston, Ferrari, and Mercedes spot as a team. Those are kind of the two big ones I'm watching. And, the development of Oscar Piastri and McLaren and how close they can get to Red Bull before the end of the year and hopefully win a race, straight up on merit versus Max before the end of the year.
Other news across F1. What are we at right now? It's one thing to have an American driver on the grid and he's not performing very well. And I think that's the person who probably loses their seat first on the F1 grid, just because it's a brutal sport. And, at some point that becomes the narrative and then just people accept it. So what's the idea, though, of an American team? How close are we? Did the Andretti situation work itself out? How close could they be to maybe adding another team onto the F1 grid?
We are getting much closer. We're halfway there. So Andretti got approved by the FIA to join the grid in 2025, I think. But there is another phase of the approval process, which is Formula One, and all the teams have to agree to it. So the FIA, as like a sporting regulation, says, yes, they qualify. Now it's up to the teams to decide, do they really want to let Andretti in on only a $200 million buy-in? Or are they going to change the rules on them and make it a larger buy-in? I think that's the thing that we have to figure out. It sounds like folks like Williams and people kind of further down the stack are putting up the most fight over it. because, that loss of share of winnings and like the revenues is probably going to hurt them the most. So I think there's still a 6-month battle in front of Andretti to get it, but it's seeming like it's going to be a lot closer and becoming a reality. And I think it's going to be super exciting to see, that opens up 2 more grid spots. So perhaps Logan doesn't make it, much further, but could come back and be driving for an American team. It'll be interesting how they fill the driver's seat there, but we're halfway there.
Is it going to end up being that Andretti Cadillac duo that they kind of planned for initially, or has that changed to anything else, or what do we know?
Still Andretti Cadillac. And it was interesting that James Vowles quote about not wanting Andretti in the sport. They said, we don't have any problem with Cadillac. We don't want Andretti. And
why?
I'm just thinking,
why
did not Mario, but Andretti the younger. Why can't I think of his first name?
Is it Michael?
Michael, sorry. Yeah, Michael Andretti. Did he make enemies when he raced his one season in the 90s, and I don't know why they don't like the Andretti guys as much. But they seem to have no problem with Cadillac as a brand.
I wonder if, that is kind of interesting because, this is a train you can't stop, right? Liberty Media is an American company that runs all of the broadcast rights for the most important time of F1 history. Am I understating that, by the way?
No, not understating it.
This is the most it's been viewed. This is the most popularity it's had. So not just adding American races. Obviously, the next natural draw is going to be to add an American team. And I'm telling you, from an American standpoint, somebody who got into the sport, in 2017, 2018, like myself, who dove in head first then, I look at it now and go, it's one thing to have a driver on there, but to actually, because I've never looked at Haas and been like, that's an American team right there. I don't know. Maybe I've shorted it, but the reality is an American team with an American name like Cadillac or Andretti attached to it, that I want to tune in. I want to see what that livery looks like. I want to see what the driver lineup looks like. I want to see, you don't think that they're going to show up and immediately start putting together a good-looking car? Like, heck no. Who knows if they're going to be competitive or not, but who cares? You're going to have a lot of new, and that's what you want. And if the American team is struggling, do it like every other sport. Make sure that, hey, throw the money at it. You'll get a lot of people. Look, Shaq will show up and throw a couple $100 million at it and go, make this car a winner. I want to see that happen in this sport. I think that's the next natural progression. If you're going to get America involved in it, to this degree, you better get an American team or two in there.
Yeah, I agree that Haas doesn't really feel like America's team. They've got, the German or Austrian team principal. They've got, European drivers. They've got an Italian engine in Ferrari. They're based in Charlotte, but they don't feel like America's team. Like, they're not the Cowboys. Right. And I think we all want the Cowboys to some degree. And Andretti, Cadillac, just super strong, American brand name. So I think it's in everybody's interest. I think the only holdup is renegotiating the buy-in of $200 million. Interesting article I read today that Mercedes published their financials, Mercedes AMG. They, in 2022, their top line revenue was close to 500 million and their operating profit was around 100 million. So you take the, general multiple for a business like that, 10 to 15 times your operating profit. They're about $1.5 billion is what I would guess Mercedes AMG is Petronas is worth. And we had the investment from like the Ryan Reynolds group earlier this year in
600
Alpine,
million, right?
That was like, somewhere is 600, 700, 800 million. So I guess that would make sense. Mercedes maybe being twice as much as them. There might be an argument for Mercedes being the most valuable team in F1. And anyways, so you look at that and you're like 200 million for Andretti to get in on this sport and then all of a sudden be worth $1 billion potentially. The other teams want to see them pony up some more money. And I think, like you said, there are American backers that can do that.
Yeah, you got to look at it like it's a negotiation. They go, we don't want you in the sport, especially at that price. And then you go, oh, okay. Well, then where are we going with this thing? Is it going to be $500 million buy-in? Obviously, when you ask a team to just basically get into the sport and then start spending a ton of money, and but what you're also talking about is like, maybe it's not totally like this, but if they end up making around 100 million, if you're Mercedes, you're spending 500 and you make 600. Like, that's pretty thin though still, right? Like, in the end, it looks like that's a lot of like having to work your tail off to, see in some cases probably a return in the negative, especially if you're not in that list of teams that's any good. If you're at the bottom, you get less wind tunnel time or whatever it is. You get or you get more wind tunnel time, but you have less to operate with. I mean, these guys it's going to be hard. So yeah, I get it. They're trying to carve out their own, and I get that Williams doesn't want to share some profits with another lowly American team coming in. But I mean, look at it from the good of the sport. You have to look at it like this is the most eyeballs and the most operating budget we've ever had to work with. And it's all thanks to, Liberty Media. And let's get those I'll take the credit for it. All these American viewers like myself who finally getting involved, you're welcome. I haven't bought a Mercedes AMG shirt yet, but, maybe I will.
Yeah, that Mercedes AMG article, this is the first time I've ever heard of a race team actually making money. Like, I think racing is just a way to turn someone's personal wealth into heat, brake dust, and entropy. Like, that's like the business model. Like, you don't make money. You do it because of an ego, or because you're a huge, Fortune 100 conglomerate that just wants to see your name on the side of a car. Right. But nobody makes money doing this.
Right. They talk about the money like it's important to be in the top of this. And there's we would be doing this on the weekends anyway. We would lose money on this stuff anyway, just because it's cool. All right. Well, looking forward to the next races. What do we have coming up? What do we have to look forward to? Please tell me that we will not have a repeat of whatever happened, the vomit comets that were there in the F1 race over the weekend in Losail.
I think we have 5 super solid races. We've got USGP in Austin, Mexico, Brazil, all known quantities. I love Brazil. That's one of my favorite races each year. And then we've got the third U.S. race in Las Vegas. That's the wild card. And then Abu Dhabi to finish out. So I think 4 races that we know kind of what to expect. And then the Las Vegas GP, which who really knows?
I haven't really ruled out yet still not going.
I'm seeing more promotional hey, buy tickets. I got one this week.
Single day tickets now available. And I just am they are going to get to the point where they go, hey, look, we didn't sell enough of these $2,500 ones. We'll give you one for $300. That's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah. Yep. If that happens, we're going. Yeah. If they just do a last minute crash, I think we just play chicken and then the week of make a decision.
Get in the Tacoma and we'll haul our butts down there. It'll be absolutely epic. All right. Dan Jimenez, as usual, my co-host here on Mode Push. Tell your friends that you listen to an American-driven podcast about F1, and it's really weird, but you know what? We have a good time doing it. So, Dan, don't throw up in your helmet this week, man.
I'll try not to.
Okay. For Dan Jimenez, Alex Kirry, we'll be back again next week. And just download the podcast wherever fine podcasts are found. We'd love to get a review from you as well. Throw a 5-star rating on there. Throw a review about how sexy Dan's voice is, whatever you want it to be. We'll see you next time, everybody.